What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be working on the second episode of the character select screen for the Super Smash Brothers tutorial. In this episode we will be kind of, not copying, we're going to use the references from the Super Smash Brothers games into our character select screen. But essentially what we're going to be doing is we have our little cursor here, which is our little hand. We're going to be able to press a button like the space bar or whatever on your key and grab the coin. I don't have an animation for the coin yet, but don't worry, we'll get one where it actually flies toward your hand and all that fancy stuff. We're just not there yet. Now, when you get your coin in your hand, you can go over a character. You won't be able to just click your character like in the past. You'll have to actually place your character down, whatever means you want, and when you hit continue, you will then play as that character. A few things to note here. Remember, this part in the tutorial, we do not have more than 4 players. Or even, we don't even have more than 1 player set up for the UI. So when we make a selection here, all the characters are going to change. One more note, this warning will be fixed in a later episode. It doesn't really hurt anything. It's telling you that this widget can't be focused. It's kind of just a warning with what Unreal wants you to do compared to what we do. So we'll get to that and we'll end up fixing that, but that's not a big deal. Don't worry if you see that. We won't actually even cover it in this episode because it's stuff that we'll be handling in the next episode. The next episode should be the final episode of the character select screen for now. But okay, so just to show you proof of concept here that this is working. Side-scroller character, he was a little flesh guy before. I've now changed him to be this kind of test dummy looking thing. He technically has the M-Door material on him, which is just the basic Unreal material, but he looks like a test dummy. And then character 2 is still this little clown guy. I reverted him from the group guy and just made him this again because these guys are easily distinguishable. I'm going to close out of them because we don't actually have to change anything with them today, but just so you can see, I can now place my coin on this guy and hit continue. And now we are the test dummy with the door material instead of the clown guy. So you can actually use this to select your characters. Let's close out of this and let's get started on the tutorial. This time we're not going to be doing any coding because we're strictly in Blueprint with our character select stuff. So there's quite a few things we have to do here to actually make this work. You don't have to make this file path or anything. Just make sure you have 4 Blueprint widgets. If you're new to the series, I will leave a link to the iCard in the top right corner. That iCard will bring you to the first episode of the Super Smash Brothers tutorial series. So you can kind of catch up if you're behind. And if that one, if you don't want to go all the way back there, you just want the menu functionality, I will leave a link to the first episode of the tutorial that we had for the character select screen only. Alright, so let's get into it. We will already have the character select screen widget. We are going to add some more functionality to it, but we need to add 3 more widgets. So if you go to add new, and another thing I say all the time, I can't show you exactly how to get to it because of the way I record my videos. But if you're at this add new thing and you got all this stuff going on, go all the way down to the bottom. It says user interface. Then you'll see this stuff pop up on the side. Font, slate brush, slate widget style. Go all the way down to the bottom and hit widget blueprint. Click it. You'll make a new one. Name it whatever you want. Make sure you have 4 total. Your character select screen. 1 for your coin, 1 for your default cursor, and 1 for your grab cursor, which is the one where you have the coin in your hand. In your character select screen, in the first episode, we made this widget. We put images over these buttons. You can see the buttons are here. The images are also here. Exact same place. The images are not hit testable in visibility. This is so we can actually click through the image and click on the button behind it and perform functionality when that button is pressed. But we're going to turn off the functionality to click the buttons, because we want to be able to place our coin here and then pick it up and place it here. So what is like, okay, I placed it here. I don't necessarily want to start the level right away. I might want to make changes to my character, change his costume, or even change my character. And this should still work. So we don't want to perform logic to go to the next screen and or start the level once we have selected our character. once we press this button anymore. We want to wait and add a new button to perform this functionality. You won't have this coin yet. It's something we're going to make, so ignore this thing that you see in the top left here. What you want to do is go to your buttons, both 1 and 2, or for however many characters you have. Scroll to interaction is focusable and turn them off. The reason for this is if you can focus the button, you won't be able to, you'll be able to click on the button and actually lose control of your mouse. In this case, we do not want that functionality because we don't want to have to press another button once we drop the coin to take control of our mouse again. And this works the same way with controllers. If you were to press A on this character, or whatever, press whatever button it is to drop your coin on the character screen, then it would actually eat your input and you would be stuck on this button. We don't want that. So for both of our buttons, turn this variable is focusable to off, to false. Then I've added a background image. It isn't necessarily needed. I just did this because I'll add one in the future. So feel free to skip this step, but it's just an image the size of the canvas panel. It's actually a little bit bigger because I just got sloppy and just threw it up there, but there you go. The CS coin, again, we'll create and we'll add this back in. And the continue button we can add now. So just go into common, button, drag it onto the screen like such, and then take text like this and actually drag it onto your continue button. Now I already have one, so you see it says widget can't accept additional children because you can only have one text for your button. But feel free to drag it on there or just line them up, or don't have the widget have text. It could be an icon, which is probably what it'll end up being, some sort of button with an image on it. But anyway, just know that this is your continue button. And we're going to do one more thing before we get into the other widgets. We're going to fill out the continue button's logic. So the continue button, for one, can be focusable. You can turn this off if you want, but I feel like once you click on the continue button, it's going to send you to the next level screen, so it's okay for that to be focusable and eat your input. When you go to continue here, you can scroll down and hit on pressed. This will account for if you click it with your mouse or if you hit any sort of accepting button on your controller. So if you're on a keyboard, if you hit enter, if you're on your Xbox controller, you hit A, whatever, this will count for that. So I'd suggest on pressed. Then it will make a node in the blueprint event graph for you. All you got to do is basically we're going to be doing the functionality that we were doing before. You can see before we had functionality to add 4 characters and set their classes. We will be doing essentially this, but I didn't feel the need to make multiple variables for all of these, and we're going to be using a variable to actually determine what class our coin was on, what character our coin was on in the widget. So, long story short, go ahead and make a character class enum variable. So hit plus, make a new variable, go to the variable type, type in the name of your enum that was in the code file. So I know we're not adding any code, but if you want, I will go ahead and open this. Might as well, actually, while we're here. Make it the appropriate size when it loads here. Remember, this is our enum right here. It's being very slow because it's still loading, but here you go. This enum blueprint type, enum class, e-character class. This is where we were determining if we're mannequin 1, mannequin 2, Mario, Luigi, whatever characters you have. So this is not important right now. It was mentioned in other episodes. I'm not going to go over it here just to not waste anybody's time. But there you go. That's what that is. I'm going to close this now. But that enum that has your characters, find that. So just search for the name. Mine is e-character class right here. There you go. Call it whatever you want. I call it a player 1 character class because since we're going to have, 8 players, however many we want, we're going to need either an array of these or a variable for each player. While you're here, you might as well make a boolean has coin. We're not going to use it yet, but feel free to make it. I will go over it when we go to use it. But again, while we're here, just make a variable. Literally the first thing, boolean has coin. This is going to determine if we currently have the coin in our hands or if we placed it down. We're going to skip the rest of the functionality for now until we make our coin and other cursors. So let's start with the default cursor. I'll show you what it is. This is one of the widgets we made. So remember, we made 4 widgets earlier. We should have character select screen, CS coin, character select coin, default character select cursor, grab character select cursor. So default cursor is the open hand, grab cursor is the one with the coin in it, and the coin should be an image as it on its own, so we can either bring it toward us or place it down. Let's start with the default cursor, like I mentioned. So all you need, literally all you need, is this canvas, which is already in here by default. Just drag in an image, so common image, drag it into the scene, like such. I called mine cursor image. If you go to appearance, brush, this may be shut, you might have to open it. Just open it up if it is. Select your image. If you don't have an image for this, that's fine. You can actually just, there are some default ones in Unreal. You can choose it. Like I could put this as my image to test if I wanted. Not a big deal. The image does not matter. It's just to make it look nice, of course. But that can come later if you don't have an image. Props to Digon, I believe I'm saying their name correctly, for this image. Copyright free image, but wow, this is a good image. Exactly what I was looking for. So thank you so much. I reached out to them and said thank you. You earned it. Perfect little Mario hand we got going on here. Copyright free Mario hand, of course. This image is going to take over for your mouse. There's a few things here. We can set up default cursors in Unreal, and we're going to do just that. However, when we go to do this, it's going to be a bit strange because when you use an image for your cursor in Unreal, your image, like where you actually go to click on it, goes to the center of the image. What I mean by that, if I were to click on this, so you can see the button in the back, and I intentionally left this in, highlights, you can see it highlight as I hover over this. Well, I made that functionality occur, right? Because I just have a button back there and there's no background on this mannequin image. So when I highlight over, or when I hover over, it highlights. If you were to just change the cursor using Unreal's cursor system, and you had your image here at the top left of the corner, or wherever in the scene, it's actually going to use this cursor and use the offset in this canvas for where your cursor is at. So that means is if it's in the top left corner, I'm trying to get a good view so you can both see it. If it was up here, I'm going to undo it so it's not. It will actually pick up on the cursor only when I'm in the center. Okay, so you see how it was working there? If we compile and save, when I go over it now, it's not highlighting, it's not highlighting. Now I'm in the center of my image, so it's highlighting. Okay? We probably don't want that. I mean, we're not going to be specifically clicking on this, but like, what about for the continue button? Maybe we want to click on it. Well, we should be able to click on it where the finger is, not in the middle of the image. So this is going to just take some work on your part. You can move it arbitrarily, like I did, and just kind of eyeball it. You can mathematically get the size of your image and move it that amount of pixels, but basically move it to a point where it is far enough away from the top left here, where it's anchored to. Like you can see, this is the anchor, this crazy little symbol here. If I move this, it moves to center. This is going to do all sorts of wonky stuff. I'm not going to do that, but it's anchored to top left by default. Where it's anchored to, just make sure that it is far enough away from its origin to fit where you want it to start at. That's probably the best way I can describe that. But see, now I can get it right on the fingertip and it works. Basically, short version, move this down and to the right and just keep it top anchor, top left anchor. That's what I did. That's what I'd recommend. However you're doing it, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure you follow the exact same rule for the default with coin or the grab character select cursor. So this is the exact same functionality. I won't really go over this, but you have your canvas, add an image right here. Select your other image, your grab image. Again, thank you so much for the images. Very good copyright-free material here. I'll actually post a link to their page if you would like to grab any of it. So here we got our image in our brush. We're good to go. We've moved him off the origin where the anchor is, so you can see when I have him, just for all purposes, I've moved him to a point where the tip of his finger does actually interact with the button. Lastly, we want to make one for the CS coin, for the character select coin. And we're going to do the exact same thing here, believe it or not. Go to common, grab your image, drag it on here, select your image in the brush. For this one, I don't have to move it from the origin or from where it's anchored to make it work, because this is going to be the one that is either spawned on the widget by default and we grab, or the one we drop. They're the same thing, but it's going to be used in those two cases. It's not going to actually link up with our mouse in any way. It's going to be, our mouse position is going to be determined when we're pressing the spacebar or whatever confirm button we are, and we will do the logic there. However, if you don't have two images and you don't want to do some sort of trick to kind of make this invisible or visible when we pick it up, like you can see my grab character select cursor has the coin involved. If you don't want this functionality, that is okay. I will mention later where to fix this, but if you want it to actually be the coin following you and not a visual trick, that's okay. Put this where it needs to be, so move it down to the right to line up with your other cursors. Then, on tick, instead of on button press, you can move the coin to where it needs to be, and that will work. I'll go over that when we get to that in a few minutes here, but just letting you know that will work, so don't worry. I tried to think of every situation for where we're at. Now, you'll see there's no logic in any of these, so don't worry about that. This is all just designer stuff, just to prove the point. I'm gonna keep these up, but we're done with them, essentially. We do need to make some references to them and such, but other than that, we're done with them. There's a few things we now need to do in the project settings. So if you go to Edit, Project Settings, go to Input, go ahead, add an action mapping, hit this little plus next to it. It'll come up with your name. Type in your name, and then find the key you want. So I have spacebar right here, and then I have gamepad face button bottom, which essentially means the face buttons are the main buttons that you can see on the front of your controller. So on PlayStation, it's X or cross or whatever. On Xbox, it is A. Pretty sure the Switch has B on the bottom. But anyway, we're getting too far into that. There's a few things we need to do here in the viewport properties to make this nicer. For the viewport properties, we want to capture mouse on launch. Sure, we can do that. You can leave that alone, because we're going to override that essentially by switching default viewport mouse capture mode to no capture. Capturing the mouse refers to, if I am to click inside here, I will no longer be able to control my mouse without hitting Shift F1 or whatever. So if we actually turn this off, capture, I think it's normally capture permanently, including initial mouse down. Actually, none of these things are focusable, so it won't work. But anyway, if you were to have things that were focusable on there that you could click on that didn't progress you to the actual game, like the continue button, you would see your mouse would get sucked up and you wouldn't be able to actually, you'd have to hit Shift F1 or whatever combination of weird buttons on real ones. For lock on capture here, or default viewport mouse lock mode, this doesn't entirely matter if there's no capture, like lock on capture. Well, we're never going to lock it. This locks the cursor to the viewport, so if I were to be able to capture it, I would not be able to move my mouse outside of the viewport. You can set this up however you'd like. I said no capture, lock on capture, because I think it's the nicest and works the best. Feel free to change it as you feel necessary. Nothing else in here needs to be changed though. Then we do need to go down to, still in engine here, where we found input, we need to scroll down to user interface. Now we want to set up our default cursors. So go to your software cursors. This might be an empty array. Sometimes there's one map element in it from a default cursor, depending on what version you're on and if you have other additional devices. But make sure you add 2. You click this little plus right here. You'll have 2 sets here. This is the type of cursor, essentially. So you can force your cursor to change to this type, but this is essentially default, resize the window, or crosshairs, hand, grab hand like we're using here. Set these to be whatever you want. I'm going to be using the default CS cursor as the default for now at least. It'll probably be the default forever because I don't know if I'm going to be changing the cursor on other menus. It could be a bit weird, but it could definitely work. Either way, here's default, so feel free. Put this on whatever one you want. I'd recommend default so you don't have to set it when the character select screen opens, at least for now. And then you're going to select your cursor. So your cursor is actually a widget. So the 2 widgets that we made, the default CS cursor and the grab CS cursor are what we're looking for. So I also chose grab hand closed for the one with the coin in it because I thought that was the closest option. And then I put grab character select cursor. Now once you do this, you should be good to go with the default. You'll probably see your cursor change right away. Let's go into our character select screen. Do a few things here that we need to kind of finish up. So for the CS coin that I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to actually add this just by searching for it. You can search CS coin. You can actually see all your user-created widgets. Just drag this one into the scene right here. And there you go. You have your coin. Put it top left like I was mentioning, just for consistency's sake and for sake of not having to deal with offsets. But this will automatically make a variable for you as well. You can see is variable is true. We're going to be using that variable later on, because essentially we're just doing some trickery to make it invisible and visible right now. In the next episode, we will be doing an animation to bring the coin toward us, because in Super Smash Brothers, if you press A, I believe it is, then the coin will fly from where it's at and fly into your hand. We want to mimic that functionality. For now, I don't have that occurring, so just put it in your scene. I put it top left because of the way everything's anchored. If not, you could get a little bit of offset, especially if you don't update it right away. So I'd recommend putting it top left, making sure it's not focusable, and visibility collapsed. Remember, we have this has coin from earlier. If you didn't make it then, make it now. This is the boolean to determine if we currently have the coin or if we placed it down. And here's where the rest of the functionality is going to be. So this is all the functionality in the character select screen. When the character select screen is constructed, event construct, we want to take player 1, and this will change when we go into multiplayer to cover all the players, but for now, player 1 is fine. There's already a lot going on in this episode, so I didn't want to make it more complicated than it had to be. Get player controller, literally get player controller, and player index 0. Drag off of that and set user focus. Literally, set user focus. I love when things are easy in Unreal. You don't need a target because the target is self, this widget that we're in. What this is going to do is make it so you don't have to click on the screen right away to gain focus of the widget. It's going to, when this widget is loaded, we already have our mouse in place and we are good to go. We are focused on this widget. So do that to start out. Then we want to do something called listen for input action. So again, just to be double checking, listen for input action, this guy right here. Listen for input action, essentially what it does is it looks for the input actions we set up in the input of project settings. So if you remember, we set up the menu grab coin. Copy this name, or if you know what it's called, just type it in to right here, to the action name. Event type can be pressed, because when we press the button, we want the functionality to perform. Consume, I believe, means to consume input. So once this input action occurs, it only will occur on the focused widget. Meaning if you have a widget in front of your game, such as a pause menu or an inventory menu. It will consume the input, so once it fires for this widget, it won't fire out in the scene. So if space is to jump, your player wouldn't jump if you had to press space in your inventory menu. We're doing something here called a callback. I'll get to this in a minute. Now we want to grab our game instance that we set up. So get game instance, this guy right here, and then you can cast to the game instance that we have set up in code. We have this class, remember. This is the one that has our array of characters and such. Then we want to set our game instance reference. So you can either drag off of this and hit promote to variable, and then just rename this variable, right click rename, or do it the old fashioned way, add a variable, and then base game instance, and get the object reference. Either way, they both work, they're both good. Just make sure you have this because we are going to use it later. Lastly, get your player controller 1 again, or 0, index 0, but player 1 again, or if you're doing this for multiplayer, whatever player controller you want, and then drag out and type show mouse cursor and hit set show mouse cursor. That's this guy. Make sure you set it to true. We want the mouse cursor to be enabled by default. If you turn it off, that's fine, but then you'll look like this, and well, I can't see anything, so we don't really want that. That's why you might as well just set it to true right on construct. That way, before you even do anything, you have the ability to use your mouse. And I know that window is annoying, I apologize. Now, to go to the callback, and this is the last part of the tutorial. The callback is, so this is a listen action, listen for input action. What this does is this essentially, it calls this function to instantiate a listener. So a listener waits for some sort of input or some return value to occur before performing other logic. The good thing about a listener is that you can call it and keep doing your logic without waiting for it. So it doesn't stop the process. We set our user focus, we set up a listener, and then we continue to do the rest of construct. But anytime after that, we hit this action name because we're waiting. Basically, this listener is listening for any time this action name, the buttons on this action name are pressed. So anytime afterward we press this, our listener is already ready to go. So when we press it, it calls this function. So the callback, basically we want an event to occur when the callback occurs. So that's how you can set it up. You can just drag off of it and open up add event and add custom event. You can right click on these and rename them. So rename it to whatever you want. I called it grab coin. This should be called maybe place coin or something like that, because this is essentially going to be grabbing the coin and releasing the coin. So you could call it whatever you want that makes sense to you. Has coin will be false by default because we don't start with it. You could start with it if you want, not a big deal. But, and actually my callback got detached because I make sure it's not detached. That will not work. So once this input action has been pressed, we're going to call this function or this event. The event is grab coin. So what we do is we check if we already have the coin. If we do, we do this logic. If we don't, we do this logic. The easier one will be if we don't already have the coin, which we don't actually. So this is good. We don't already have the coin because this is false by default. So when space is pressed, we say, no, we don't have the coin. We get our player controller 0, and we set our current mouse cursor. So drag off your player controller, set current mouse cursor, this one right here. And we're setting the type of cursor. We're not setting the image here, we're setting the type of cursor. So when we were in here, project settings, user interface, the grab hand closed is the one I'm selecting. It's just big enough to go off the screen, so give me 1 second. You can see here that the grab hand closed is what we're setting. That's where I set my grab character select cursor, which if you don't remember is the one with the coin in it already. Alright. Then we're saying, yeah, we have the coin. So now we have the coin. Set boolean has coin to true. Then we use our widget, CS coin, right here, and we set his visibility to be collapsed. what we're doing here, this is a little bit of a fake out. Again, this is where you could do this on tick if you wanted. If you did this on tick, then you want to actually need to set your widget to be invisible, or set it back to be visible again. And you also want to have to check the location of it before setting its translation, which I know we haven't gone over that yet, but it's important to mention here because you're asking, why are you setting the coin to be collapsed if we have the coin now? What I'm actually doing here is I'm placing the coin in my hand, but really I have the coin at my mouse's position, but this image is actually just the cursor with the coin in the hand. It's just a trick. That way we don't have to keep two objects being displayed and being tracked at all times. You could just do a tick on it. It's really not going to be the end of the world, and keep them over top of each other. But you can also do this, and when you press space, you actually instantiate the coin right here, or not instantiate it, but you make it visible again, and then change your cursor back to the other one. So you can see the little delay you may see. So sometimes you're like, wait, he pressed the button. Is the audio not synced? No, that's actually not the case. Unreal has an issue where if you don't move the mouse, it won't update. So watch, I have the coin right now. If I press space, I don't lose the coin, and the coin doesn't spawn. Weird, right? But if well, the coin spawns, but it's underneath of it. But weird, it's like, what the heck happened? Now, as soon as I move my mouse just a little bit, oh, it's down there. What the heck? And same here. So if I click this, you can see the coin disappeared, the logic went through, but the mouse did not update. The cursor did not update until the mouse moves. That's an Unreal bug. We can fake making the mouse move and actually fix this issue, which we will do in the next episode. But just know you'll have that bug. You didn't do anything wrong if you're seeing that happen. That's just that's actually a known Unreal bug. Alright guys, so I actually had to cut for a second and remove some stuff. I had additional nodes in here that I wasn't using. Feel free to remove them if you added them before I'm mentioning this, but essentially there is a better node to use here that I learned about after the fact, and I forgot to switch it in this instance. And also I removed a get widget geometry node, which converts absolute space to local space, but we're not going to end up needing that with the way we're implementing this. So feel free to take that out if you added it. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're getting our player controller 0. We're making sure it's the default because, again, on this callback, we're pressing space if we already have the coin. So we already have the coin, we press space. That means we're releasing the coin. We want to set this back to the released coin state or the default state. Say, no, we don't have the coin anymore. We want to call a function that says get mouse position on viewport. This is important because this will make sure that regardless of the resolution, we will be able to have the coin in the proper spot. So if everything widgets is resolution dependent. So if you make this bigger, this actually won't work the way you think it will. If you were to not have any of that logic in here, and I place this coin down, great. When I make this screen bigger, this coin could be somewhere else entirely. Because when things scale in a widget, they don't necessarily scale evenly, right? Or they do, but they scale at the rate of the resolution, which could change where this position actually is. But if we do the logic correctly, we can place it wherever, full screen, minimize, whatever, and it will still work. That's what we want, especially because it's not necessarily that they are changing the resolution while they're playing the game, but different TVs, different devices that it's going to will be different resolutions, so good to account for this anytime you can. Get mouse position on viewport. Now we're going to be using that CS coin variable that we made earlier, and we're going to be setting the render translation, which means we're setting the position of it, essentially. The translation from where we were to where we are now. So drag your CS coin in like this. Type in set render translation. Grab this guy. Drag in your, I think this is a vector 2D. Yep. Drag in your vector 2D from your get mouse position on viewport into your translation value. Then, once it's already been moved, set it to visible. You should do it in this order just so you don't see any sort of movement, just in case you get a little bit of lag or anything like that. So make sure you move the coin first to where you want to be. And understand what we're doing here is we have our coin and we're switching our cursor back to default. Then we're moving our coin to the mouse position. That's what this is doing. This returns the mouse position on the viewport. We want to move the coin to this position, and then we want to make it visible. So it's like it spawns in, right? We have it here, and then we say, okay, move the coin to the position and then change the cursor back. Just like that. Then we're going to call a function that I made called determine coin placement. So you can do the logic outside of this function if you want, but you don't have to. You can do it inside like I'm doing and make a new function. I'll help you out. Determine coin placement is kind of a loaded function, but it's actually all the same thing over and over again, just for all your characters. So if you want to make a function, just hit plus function over here in the functions tab. Call it whatever you want. I called mine determine coin placement. You will have one node to start out. What we're doing here is we're going to be making our own collision for our menu here. So as far as I understand it, Unreal doesn't have a good way of determining if two objects within a widget are colliding. Now, I could be very wrong about that. Feel free to call me out on it. If you're like, there's a solution, all you have to do is check this box, then that would be great. I could not find it. I've had issues with this in the past, and I haven't been able to dig up anything. It might be easier. I might be overlooking it, so feel free to correct me. If not, there's quite a simple way to actually just determine if two objects are colliding. All you have to do, grab the object, the first object you want to check against, and the second object you want to check against. So grab them both. Our coin and character 1 button. You could also do character 1 image if you want, but I know images could sometimes they can leave the box, or sometimes they're smaller than the actual like room for error, where you want to be able to release the coin, so the coin will actually drag toward the character box. I'm going to be checking specifically for the coin and button 1. Now, for the coin, we can get our render transform right here. It just says get transform, but it's get render transform when you actually press it. We want to break it, so literally type break, that one right there. And we want to grab just our translation, get our X and Y. We won't go into what's going on here until we do the bottom part here, but do this, make sure you can get your X and Y of where the coin is at. Now, with our character 1 button, we want to call something called get slot. It lets you edit objects within the layout of the widget more easily. So essentially, you're taking this button and you can't really just check for like get position. It actually doesn't exist. But if you get the slot, you're actually getting the slot of the widget where this button is held. So it's more of an internal operation. So just get slot, that's this. Cast to canvas panel slot. So there's different slots depending on what they're held in. By default, it's held within the canvas panel. So just cast it to a canvas panel slot if you're using your canvas. At which point, you can actually get your position and get your size and things like that. We want to take the result from our cast here. We want to get the position and get the size, and then break those vectors out, just the same way we did up above. So just literally drag off and type break for both position and size. We're going to need the X and Y's of all of these. We check if the coin's X is greater than or equal to the button's X. So in this case, in our case, the button's X and the coin's X are both in the top left corner. For pretty much everything you do in Unreal by default, the top left corner of the object is going to be where its position is, at least regarding widgets and 2D operations like this. But if the coin's X fits within the first boundary, the left side of character 1 button, and it's less than or equal to the X of the character 1 button plus the size of the character 1 button, that X value. What we're doing here is, since the button has its X value at the top left, we want to check the size, the X size value of the button, and add that to the position here. We'll use the real numbers here so you can check it yourself. It starts at position 44 and its size is 225. That means we know at 44 plus 225, we are no longer on button 1. Character 1 button. We're no longer on that. So if we are less than or equal to the position plus the size, but greater than the position of the button, then that is true. We are within the bounds, the X bounds of character 1 button. We also have to do this for the Y though. if the coin's Y is greater than or equal to the position of the button, because remember, the origin of the button is top left, top. So we have to be at the top if the coin is greater than that, because the Y value goes up as we go lower on the widget. So you can see the Y value here is 32. If I were to bring this down, it would go up drastically to 300. I'm going to move it back. So if the coin is greater than the initial Y value, and or equal to it, and it's less than or equal to the position of the button plus the size Y of the button. So it's the same process here. The position is 32 and the size is 200. So if the coin is placed anywhere between 32 and 232, 32 and 232, it is colliding with button 1's Y value. So it is within these Y bounds of character 1 button. Thus, it's within the bounds of character 1's X and character 1's Y button values. We are, in fact, highlighting player 1. If it's true, we're going to add a return node like this. And initially, you won't have these values here. So go over to the outputs. So click on the return node, go over to your outputs, hit plus. It'll say new parameter, and find your class. I'm returning the character class, which is the same thing that we set up earlier here. It's your enum, remember, the character class. You can determine the type that you want. We can do drop downs, or you could, do this a little bit more formally. But I'm just returning this so that we can set this player 1 character class we have out here. So if it's true, if all this stuff is true, and just a quick note, if you need to add more pins on your AND node here, just left click on your add pin right here. And you can go from 2 to 4 to 6 to however many you want. If it's not true, if the coin did not line up with any of these parameters, this is false. If this is false, we have to do all the same thing, literally the same thing, copy paste, except you want to check character 2 button instead of character 1 button. You can do this for every character you have. This will also work for stages. You can use this for anything you need, the same logic. So you might even want to break this into a function and just pass this part in, which is actually what we're going to do in the next episode, little spoiler. But I wanted to just show you, and again, try to make it as not complicated as possible. However, if it's not within player 1's bounds, or character 1 bounds, but it is in character 2 bounds, if that's true, then we return mannequin 2. Okay, so once we're done with this function, we just take the return node that we added, set it to our player 1 character class that we made, and then we already did this part, but down here, we go ahead and add our character class. Instead of manually adding them like we were last time, we can use this variable to actually track what class they should be. This is also good because if we do this, we don't have to set the character class when the button is pressed. We can set the class before, which allows us to be able to do costume changes and color changes, or even name changes, like if you want to have your name follow your character around, before we end up going to the next part. So this is a very good way to implement this, and will help us greatly in the future. Get your game instance reference, like I said, we will use it later. Get your character classes array, add your new character class once the game starts, and open the level. Then, at the end of the day, guys, you'll be able to grab your coin, place it down on a character, play as that character, or place it on the other character and play as that character. You can also hide the mouse and things like that when you go into the game mode, which you probably should, but again, we have a whole nother episode dedicated to the character select screen, so we'll clean up a lot of that stuff in the future. Lastly, if you click off the screen, you're probably thinking what happens, or like if I leave the coin here. Since we have a default value for our enum, it will just put you as a default class. You'll probably want to do other functionality to automatically put it on the first character or something like that, or put it on random. That way it looks a little bit better than them just leaving it there and then they become the first character. But again, that's all polished. It doesn't crash, and it does the functionality that we are explicitly telling it to do. So I think this is a victory this time around. Okay guys, this was an insanely long video. and I knew it was going to be that way, but this is quite a complicated system because there's so many things that have to be so precise. Like even with these images, you got to make sure everything's in the right spot. You want to make sure it's like, oh, anchored top left, but we bring it down here so it looks nice. Just, it's a lot of polish in this, but it really comes together at the end when you get this result. And you can actually place your coin here and select your character. Again, stage selection will be probably the exact same thing. We might change it up a bit, just proof of concept or whatever, but there you go, guys. This is part 2 of the character select screen for the Super Smash Brothers tutorial. In the 3rd episode, it should be the final one at least for now, we will go over some polish. We will also go over a bit of the multiplayer functionality for it, if not all of it. We're going to actually implement some stuff to make characters show up down here and for you to be able to change their color and such. Alright guys, I'm out of breath after that one. If you needed any help with this tutorial, and this one was very specific, like I said, very complicated, so no harm done if you do, feel free to leave a comment down below. I will answer all of them. I will gladly get to you. However, if you want more personalized help where we can send pictures back and forth and I can kind of walk you through the process or have quicker debugging, feel free to join the Discord. The link is in the description. I can't put it in an iCard because of the way YouTube works. It's a little bit weird, but it's in the description right next to Discord. If you'd like to come hang out with me and support me on Twitch, just, you know, have a good time, watch me fail at some Dark Souls or beat hardest difficulty Resident Evil with the top rank, whatever, then feel free to come join us on Souls Wednesday or Resident Evil Friday for some Twitch gameplay at twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. No, I am not the 27th Shawnthebro. I should be the first, but I guess I was the second in terms of Twitch. So rip me, rip my account, but Shawnthebro27 if you guys want to check us out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it really helped you, and apologize for all the little things that are a little bit inconvenient, but this is just a more complicated video for something that there's not a lot of support or stuff like that out there for. Anyway, guys, I'm going to head out for the night, but I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.